What's happening, boot junkies? Mike Dog Audio here, back with another video on home studio setup for voiceover. Getting my headphones. One sec. Oh, that feels good. Love putting on these cans. These are comfortable headphones. I love these headphones. We are here to talk about this microphone that was lent to me by a fellow booth junkie. Thank you for lending me this microphone. I am so psyched to use it. I've been wanting to use this family of microphones for a long time, and I've never really had the opportunity to get my mitts on one. So this is a broadcast classic. This is the ElectroVoice RE27 ND microphone. This is EV stands for ElectroVoice. That's the manufacturer. RE27 is the brand. And this is the big brother, the step up from another broadcast classic, which is the RE20, which I'm sure many of you that are familiar with microphones have heard about if you actually haven't heard. This is the big brother to a big sister, the older sibling, the other one in the family. The difference between the RE27 and the 20, and I wish I had one here to do a comparison, but I don't have a comparison model here. We're going to compare this mic to a bunch of other ones, just not the RE20 because I don't have one. The difference between the RE27 and the RE20 is threefold. There's a lot of differences between them, but on the surface when you're looking at them, the RE20 to me sounds muffled compared to this 27. The 27 is a bright microphone. It's got a lot of high-end clarity to it that the RE20 tends to not have. You know what I'll do? In prep for this video, I was watching some old videos by the EV guy, who's an employee of ElectroVoice, and he did a side-by-side comparison of these two microphones. And listening to the two, it's like night and day between the RE27 and the RE20. The 20 sounds like this, whereas the 27 sounds nice and clear.
So here's the RE27 totally flat, and I'm going to also bring up the RE20. So here's the RE20 totally flat. My lip is about 2 inches from the mic.
It's not better or worse. It sounds different. The RE20 is a classic microphone. It's used forever, so I'm not going to knock that microphone. It just sounds, compared to this one, this is a much brighter microphone. ND is the model, and now that stands for, ND refers to the fact that this uses a neodymium magnet in it, which makes it more sensitive, makes it louder. It's going to have more volume at a particular gain level, which means in this case, I'm not using a cloud lifter for this microphone because so far, from what I've been able to tell, I haven't needed it. I only have my preamp set just slightly hotter than I'd use for my Neumann or my Sennheiser 416. This one doesn't require the gain to be completely cranked up. I'm at probably 58, 57, 58 dB of gain, and my preamp goes up to 60 dB of gain. So this one does not require huge gargantuan amounts of gain like some of the other dynamic microphones do, like the Shure SM7B. I think also the RE20 does have a reputation for requiring a fair bit of gain. The microphone itself uses the classic, what EV calls the variable D technology design, and the whole point of variable D is ElectroVoice does not have proximity effect. By design in their microphones, the variable distance from the microphone, so as you get really close to the microphone or as you pull away from the microphone, the sound of your voice doesn't change. So when voice actors talk about leveraging the proximity effect to really get that bass in your voice, when you get close to this mic, you don't get the additional bass in your voice, which is not good. It's not bad. It's just different. It's the design that they have built into these microphones. The 27 has it, the 20 has it, and others. What they say is that these these slots on the side. There's a tube that runs through that's like a canceller. It's the variable D, whatever that technology is. I don't claim to understand it. I'm not an engineer. But what they say is if you do close them up, that you can get a little bit of proximity effect out of it because you're blocking the little sound tubes that are using that, whatever the technology is, it cancels out the proximity effect. So that's what you need to know. This microphone, as you get up to it, your voice does not change. You don't get the bass into it, for better or for worse. And so that's what the microphones themselves are known for. And that's why broadcast DJs like them, especially when guests are, you're on their mic, or you can work the mic from a gain perspective. You can be louder, you can be softer, but your voice doesn't change. So that actually can be very handy. And if you're a voice actor and you're animated and stuff like that, as you move around the mic, you're not going to change the EQ of that mic. You'll change the volume of your voice, but you won't change the EQ. Variable D technology. The RE27 has 3 switches on it, and it's there are different EQ switches. This is a single pattern mic. It's a cardioid pattern mic, and there are 3 switches on it. There are 2 different kinds of bass roll-off, and there's a high roll-off a switch to it. What they say about the 27 is that it naturally has 5 or 6 dB of boost in the high frequencies. So the one switch, which is kind of unusual for a microphone, but it does have a high attenuation switch. So let's just go through the different switches and you'll see how it changes. I'm a flat microphone guy, and I typically do my EQing in processing in the EQ plugin, but you can change it in the mic. So we'll talk about when you might use some of these. So looking at the switch, so this one here, this one is the high end attenuation. So what this is going to do is going to pull 3 dB out of the high end of the mic. So I forget what high constitutes, but let's say it's over a few thousand kilohertz. I'm going to switch that down. And so what you should have heard immediately is my voice won't be nearly as bright. So I'm still right up on the mic, but it took a lot of the sharpness out. It took a lot of the high. Might consider that you warmed the microphone up a bit, but it does take it could take the sibilance out. It could act as somewhat of a de-esser, but it will take some of the highs out. Now, interestingly, this will still be a brighter microphone, even when this switch is engaged, than some of the other dynamic microphones. So, nice bright microphone. But if it's too bright in its natural setting, you can attenuate that brightness here on microphone. Putting that switch back. Now we're going to go to the lowermost switch, and this is your much more typical bass roll-off switch. So what this does is this lowers the sensitivity to bass frequencies, but it's from like 250 to 100. Let's put this down. Now, in my testing with this one, I haven't noticed a huge amount of change. It does the term I've heard used is it thins your voice out. You'll see what I mean when we get to the middle switch. But this one is really a good EQ if you do have traffic nearby, if you've got a furnace in your house, if you've got some natural room rumble, that's a low frequency rumble. That first switch, the sort of your standard bass roll-off switch, that's what that switch is for. Now, the middle switch. I hate the middle switch because I think it makes my voice sound terrible. And it may be used for different instruments you might be miking. It could be for different kinds of voices. But the middle one is an attenuation from 100 hertz up to 1,000 hertz. So a mid-range roll-off. And when I go into that switch, I feel like it really thins my voice out quite a bit. Maybe it would be flattering for somebody's voice. I don't feel like it's particularly flattering for mine, but that's just, the way I probably am accustomed to hearing my own voice. But I like to have a lot of presence, and I feel like it takes it away when I have that mid-range disengaged. But those are the 3 switches. Now, you can combine them. The first and the middle and the bass roll off, they roll off the same amount. When the mid range just rolls off more. So the bass is from 100 to 250 hertz, and the other one is from 100 to 1,000 hertz. So two different kinds of bass roll off. It doesn't make sense to engage them both. And then the high frequency would roll off. So you could do an EQ curve that's a little bit upside down U, not that disco smile shape, but the other shape, a downward mid pass, I guess is what you call it. I don't know. Maybe there's a term for it that isn't coming to my head at the moment. But you could use a combination. You wouldn't do the two bass because that would just be redundant. But I suppose you could change them both. I will say I do like. Make sure I'm flat here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm flat. So just to make sure. So I do really like the way I sound on this microphone in its flat state. I found it's not incredibly bassy, so it doesn't have that that proximity, that boom, which in certain circumstances I actually think that could be a super helpful thing. All right, so now you've heard this microphone. I'm going to do some different mic setups, and I want to compare this microphone to some of the other mics in my locker that you might be considering to go up against this microphone. So let me do some setups here, and we'll keep going. Okay, so I'm going to compare this now to the. I'm going to compare this one now. Oh, I can't have my headphones on now. I'm going to compare this to, and we're going to hear this after. I can't. I'm hearing them at different latencies in my ear, so it's too confusing. So we're going to compare the RE27 and D to the Shure SM7B. I'll make sure our capsules are about the same spot. So the Shure SM7B is another condenser microphone that is very commonly used in a comparison and a contrast between both the RE27 and the RE20. You often hear the 7B and the RE20 measured a lot against each other because they're both dynamic microphones. So let's just talk into the SM7B for a few seconds. So the SM7B, you'll see it does have I think it does sound different based, I can't describe it now because I can't hear it, but I do feel like this is a warmer mic, whereas the 27 is a nice bright mic. I feel the 7B can be a little bit warmer. Now, the 7B, I do think you can get a little bit more proximity effect out of it by getting close to it. And so sometimes they'll say the 7B is good for a deep male voice. It's can make you sound words like more authoritative, more robust, and that's just sort of the nature of the bassy. Bass forward notion of the 7B. Notion's not the right word, but it does sound, to me, it sounds more bass forward. And we'll see how it actually compares to the RE27. So that is a comparison between the 7B and the RE27ND. Now, my Shure 7B, just to keep it apples to apples, I have them both set flat. The 7B has some EQing that you can do to it. There's a presence that you can add to the high end, so you can change those around. I have another video on the SM7B somewhere that you can watch where I compare it. Have I done this one yet? I don't know. I know I've compared this to other microphones, but I can't remember if I've done like a full overview of the 7B. Can't remember. But that's the way these two microphones sound when compared to each other. So let us now try another microphone to see how it sounds. All right, so now we're going to do a sound comparison between the RE27 and the Rode NT1A. Big price difference between these two microphones, and they're two totally different kinds of microphones. So the RE27, I don't think I've mentioned the price on this one. This one, I think right now is $499. $499 when I think that's pretty typical street. The regular price, the street price for this one is $499. Now the NT1A is like half of that. I think it's like a $200 microphone off the top of my head. I can't remember exactly. I'll put a picture there. But this is the Rode NT1A. Now the NT1A also is a nice bright microphone. I do find that it's a bit bright for me, but we'll see how it compares to this one because it could be just that I'm having a bad memory of it. But the NT1A, also an extremely popular mic. It is a condenser mic, large diaphragm condenser mic. And so they should sound somewhat different. Now, I'm talking into the NT1A. Now, I'll aim my voice over at the the RE27 to give you a sense of how the difference is. And you really do address them from different distances. The condenser mics, I find that I typically am a little bit farther off the microphone, whereas on the dynamics, I want to be closer, maybe half the distance. The dynamics, you really have to be up close to them, whereas the condensers can be a bit more forgiving because they've got a greater sensitivity to it. I did turn the gain down a little bit on my preamp for the NT. It still seems like it's going to be a touch hotter, but you'll generally find that the condensers will be far more sensitive. They will require less gain. You can turn them down a bit. This is the Rode NT1A versus the RE27. Moving on. The next microphone that we'll compare the RE27 to is one that's similar in price point to it. Again, totally different kind of microphone. This is the CAD E100S. I'm just looking at my switches, making sure that no switches are engaged. This is also set to flat. The CAD E100S condenser mic. This mic is about $399, $425 thereabouts compared to the RE27. Now, these are both, whereas this is a bright mic, I feel like lost my train of thought. The E100S is a nice neutral condenser microphone, and I'm going to try not to pop it here as I'm working without a filter. And I should mention that the RE27 does have a nice pop filter built into it. So the end of this microphone does have foam behind the basket, so it does have a natural pop filter built into it. Whereas for the normal condenser mics, you do want to have a pop filter in front of it. If you're curious about pop filters, I've got a video all about pop filters. But the condensers can be extremely sensitive to pops. They do need to have a filter in front of them. I do find that the E100S, you do have a little bit of proximity effect that you can leverage. So if you do want to try and get some additional bass in your voice, you can change your voice a little bit and get a little bit more bass into it, whereas that doesn't necessarily happen. You'll see I still sound thin when I try and add that boom to my voice. I'm really leveraging the proximity effect in the microphone. But that's, so that's a difference. I do find that characteristically, if I'm trying to put in my head how these sound without my headphones on, these are going to probably be the most similar comparison, and we'll side by side. You'll be able to BS, Mike, you're totally wrong. But in my head, if I were to guess, these would be the most similar. The NT1A might be similar to this because it's brighter than this microphone, but this is a comparison, a side-by-side comparison of the CAD E100S and the RE27, just to give you a sense of two reasonably close in price. All right, let's do one. We got two more mics we'll give a try to. So now we have a comparison between the Neumann TLM 103 and the RE27. These are two pretty significantly different price points for microphones. The RE27, as I mentioned before, is $499. Now the Neumann is about $1,000, depending on whether or not you buy the shock mount. I think you can get a little bit less if you go without the shock mount, I think. But generally speaking, this is about $1,000. These are both the same pattern. These are both cardioid patterns. The Neumann itself does not have any switches to it. There's no pad. There's no bass roll-off. There's no nothing. It's just microphone. And they do both share the same pattern. Now, I don't think these, based on what I know about these microphones, I don't think they're going to sound anything alike. I think they're both going to sound good. They're going to sound good, but I'm going to sound different between them. The Neumann, for me, has probably, of all my microphones, probably about the best bass response. So if you want to have a nice, round, bassy sound to your voice, the Neumann is really a good way to go. Whereas the 27 will sound bright, probably brighter than the Neumann, so more high end than the Neumann. The Neumann is going to have a better sounding low end, is my guess. Because I've never listened to these side by side. You're going to hear it at the same time I am. The Neumann, you can get a lot of proximity effect out of it. My tone should change as I get close to the mic, and I'm really trying not to pop it. But as I get close to the mic, you should see that there is a tonal change, an EQ change. I'll have more bass in my voice as I get closer. Whereas the RE27, as I get close to it, it really doesn't change. I'm just louder, not tonally different. Again, that's something that you may or may not want. It's up to you to decide if that's important. Some people like to be able to get up there and add that authority to their voice by getting in there, whereas other people just want to get louder as they get closer. Your choice. The Neumann does have like your typical shock mount, whereas the RE27 has some amount of internal shock mount, but the shock mount that you would normally get for this is this like great big trapeze looking deal. I'll put a picture of it, but there is like a $100 trapeze that you can add to these, and this is a heavy mic. I don't know from that big suspension thing, but this is a heavy microphone. It's like almost 2 pounds. I think it's like rated at 1.6, 1.9 pounds. It's heavy. When you hold it, you're like, whoa, that's a microphone. Whereas like the NT1A, I bet the NT1A probably weighs in the few ounces, like maybe 8 or 9 ounces. I bet this has a full pound, even though dimensionally they were similar in size. So that's the comparison between the Neumann TLM-103 and the RE27. One more mic to test. Okay, so here's the last one that we'll do a comparison for, because I think it will give us a nice, good overall scope of how this compares to a bunch of different microphones. We're now going to compare the RE27 to the Sennheiser MKH416 shotgun microphone. These are very different microphones. This one is also the Sennheiser is also a condenser microphone, does require phantom power, whereas the RE27 is a dynamic and does not. The Sennheiser does have a good proximity effect to it, so as you get closer to it, you really can leverage some proximity effect to it. You will get a tonal change for it, whereas the RE27, you won't, as I've mentioned before. Now, these can be used in different ways for the same thing. If there were two microphones, I'd say that of all of these, that would be best for a slightly noisier environment. So if you're at your desk and let's say you want to do something for a podcast or you're doing it for your gaming channel and you've got computer noise that you need to worry about, the RE27 would be good because you can get it close to your face without changing the tone, and you can set it so that it's less sensitive to the outside environment. So as you pull away from that microphone, pretty quickly that sound falls off. So you get nice and close to this microphone, and just the farther away sounds won't be loud. Whereas the shotgun microphone, while it's a sensitive microphone, it's got a very narrow sensitivity pattern. Hypercardioid, I think, is how you'd consider a shotgun, maybe even narrower than that. So sound from the side and from behind the microphone, as you pull away from the side of the microphone, it gets quieter, which means sounds that are occurring off to the sides are less likely to be heard. They'll be lower in the microphone than if it was directly in front. So you can attenuate outside unwanted noise from these microphones. Different techniques, but to the same effect at the end. This one is because the sensitivity is very narrow. This one is because it's dynamic, and the farther away the sound is, the more likely it is going to be to drop off. So we have a comparison now between the Sennheiser and the ND20. Sound-wise, I am going to guess that the Sennheiser is going to sound fuller. I think the Sennheiser, the 416, will have slightly better bass response because this microphone, this is a guess on my part, this microphone is meant to be used at a greater distance, so that proximity effect will be present as I get closer. And so I find that for voiceover work, this does have a good overall tone. It's got a nice bright high end, a pleasant mid-range, and a good robust bass, whereas I feel like this one, because it doesn't have the proximity effect, you won't have as much bass in it, and it's really just a preference thing. This the Sennheiser does require a fair bit. You sort of have to lock yourself in position when you're recording with this microphone, because you do get pretty significant EQ changes as you move to and from and side to side. whereas the 27 I think would be more forgiving of somebody moving around because of the variable D. But it's going to have that variable D does take some of the bass away. Oh, okay. So the Sennheiser, you do have to sort of lock yourself in, but it does, when you are locked into that sweet spot, you do get a good sound out of it. There you have it. I think and this one, $1,000, $499, so this one costs twice as much. So there you have it. Let's move this one out of the way. Let's put the 27 back in my face. So that is my review of the RE27 ND dynamic microphone from ElectroVoice. Thanks again to the booth junkie that lent this to me. You'll get it back soon. Maybe. No, I'm kidding. You'll get it back soon. And thank you so much for sharing it with me. I'm really, really grateful. It's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to use this mic. I've really enjoyed using it. And I got to make that other video with it about ACX. And I really enjoyed using it. It's really good. It is probably the hardest thing about this microphone is its weight. So you have to really get it clamped into its shock mount. Otherwise, it will tend to drift, and maybe that's why that suspension mount is so good and robust. This is a heavy mic, but man, does it sound good. I really do like the way I sound on this microphone. The ElectroVoice RE27. So that's all I have for you today. Go get yourself a microphone, maybe an ElectroVoice, and record something amazing. Oh, and subscribe and like and comment and do all those things for me. Would you please? I'm so grateful for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Now, go out there and record something amazing.